So I'll go basically from global view you got from him to a more granular view. Little district, 1,450 kids, about 35 miles west of Phoenix, right out by the nuclear plant there. We have 2 elementary schools and a high school. So that's, in the last 7 years in our budget, we've cut $2 million basically, has been the effect of dealing with all those cuts. Now, at the same time that happened, when I got out there, I was crazy enough to think that the district being in receivership and complete disarray was actually an opportunity. And I got a few other talented people who believed that as well. And so in the last 7 years then, we did emerge from receivership. That took a couple of years. Our credit rating went from junk bond status basically, now we're AA minus. So that's according to standards, which that in itself was an achievement. But we now have 2 A-rated schools, from D-rated schools to A-rated schools. We've got, this is my elevator speech to the legislator, so I love the applause. No, it's not for me. I was sort of the cheerleader of all this. There's a bunch of people working really hard to make this happen. A couple other things happened as well. In 2007-8 at Tonopah Valley High School, that's the year before we took over, had a graduation rate of a shameful 46.8%. Appalling. When we walked around in the school and saw the teachers, we knew why. I mean, just, there was not good. The school was being run on the basis of adults first. And so we had to change that. Now it's 95% in the last year. This year we graduated, we had 80 seniors in the class and 80 graduated. So that's been a long climb, but a successful one. And
I think the state average is right around 75.
yeah, we're well above the state average now. That's due to dedicated people. But we had to do that while cutting $2 million. So that wasn't easy. And what do those cuts mean? I'll just give you a little bit of an idea. The workforce went from 190 to 160. We cut a lot of positions that I wouldn't say they weren't essential. Some of them were nice to have but not need to have, and then others were need to have but you simply can't afford it. Oh, I love this spotlight. It helps to have a sense of humor in bad times. You cut the budget and make people chuckle while you're doing it. And they feel it later, of course. Our staff members have been their pay's been frozen 6 of the 7 years that I've been there. Last year we were able to give a 1% stipend, not a raise in the base pay, but a 1% stipend, and everybody in the district got that except me. And I chose not to take it so I could always tell the legislators when I'm promoting things that I've had the same pay for 7 years. So it's just, so no worries about inflation there. A couple other examples of it. For example, each of our schools has beautiful libraries. We have very nice facilities. We haven't had librarians for 5 of those 7 years. So you can go in there, there's no librarian, there's no library aide. You know, if a teacher wants to bring the kids in and check it out, then she pulls up the computer system, the kids check out books, she does that herself. We don't have any librarians. From someone who lives in a house full of books, that's been a tough thing to do, but it's just, that's part of what happens. Just a couple other little things. Sometimes you hear about schools have kindergarten aides to help the kindergarten teacher. That doesn't exist. We have classroom aides or paraprofessionals only for special ed students that when it's needed, wheelchair students and so on. No other classroom aides. That doesn't exist. Class size, for example, this coming year now, we're looking probably at 30 to 31 kids in first grade. Last year we had in 8th grade at Chartessa, which is an A school, of 45 kids in 8th grade. And the teachers were heroic in doing that. And Chartessa was our district-sponsored charter school. It's going back the other way now. That's a cut of about $370,000. That they can't be a charter school anymore. That just gives you some examples. My high school has 4 very large buildings, not counting the gymnasium and so on. I have 2 custodians. We could easily use 4, but again, if you're cutting, we try at the last to cut and make cuts in the classroom. You try to cut everything else first. A couple other interesting things. The other day someone said to me I was going to set up a meeting. They said, well, I'll have my secretary call your secretary. I don't have a secretary, haven't had one for 7 years. It's, that's a frill. So it basically just is. We don't do any travel. If I go to a national conference, which I do every year, then I pay my own way because I want to keep current on things. But otherwise, there's no travel unless we get a grant that sponsors some sort of travel to a conference. Otherwise, there's no travel. No one has any district cars. No one has any district credit cards. No one has any district phone. This is my phone for everything. It seems like about 80% of it ends up being district business. But that's just, you just learn to live with those things. So that's just a couple of things of how we feel it. The supplies to the teachers in the classroom always are quite limited. I'm always hounding them about using less paper and so on. But that's just a little bit of an idea how some of that works. Now this year, for example, we got in new money from the legislature when all was said and done, and Chuck worked you through those various cuts, and they gave here and they took away here. When it was all said and done, we got $7,600 in new money. That's for 3 schools. So don't spend it all in one place. But we lost the district-sponsored charter, so that was about a minus $370,000. In addition, last year we had an override for many years, despite having A-rated schools and improving graduation rate, the override did not pass. So this year we're taking a $265,000 cut from the loss of the override. And our insurance costs went up $110,000. So we got a plus 7,600, and we're looking at about a minus 700,000. And so that left our board this spring in the last few months with some very difficult choices. And by the way, he made a reference to summer school, and summer school is off the boards. We have lots of kids who really need summer school. But unless I can talk some of you in this room, and I've had some success with that in funding a 2 or 3 week summer school project at one of my schools. We're about 70% free lunch for the whole district, couple schools in the 80s. Unless I can talk a grant funder into sponsoring a summer school or some kind of program like that, that doesn't exist. So the board looked at the choices, and we presented them with some different choices. We could cut, the override was, part of it was to sponsor extracurricular activities in sports. It was to sponsor career and technical education in the high school, which we have a very active agricultural program, very active construction program, very popular graphic arts program. We could cut those. We could go from all-day kindergarten to half-day kindergarten. We pay for the other half on the backs of higher class size in the other grades. We could cut that. We could cut art, music, and PE. Now there's consequences to that. When this 4th grade classroom gets a prep period is when the kids go to PE. So if you don't have PE or art or music anymore, then that teacher they teach all day, which is difficult without at least sending the kids off to somebody else for art or music or PE. Not to mention the opportunities that provides for students to have this other outlet, which for those of us who love music and love art and who have memories of school chorus and school plays and playing in the band and doing all those things that make education richer, then that was difficult. And so we had the big community and debate on cutting extracurricular activities versus, I met with some teachers right after the override failed and said, help me think of things. We've been cutting year after year after year after year, now we got to do it again. I'm running out of ideas. And one of them said, let's look into the 4-day week that many rural schools have. So the board weighed those 2 things, and we were going to a 4-day week. Now, we're in an area where almost all of our kids are transported, so we bus kids 3,000 miles a week. All of that, by the way, is non-classroom spending, so when they report classroom spending, it's just if we don't bus them, there's nobody in the classrooms to spend anything on. That's another story.
Do you know how many districts around the state have gone to a 4-day week? Over the last.
Over the last 7 years, there's been at least 2 dozen. Just this year, I know Apache Junction went and we went. I'm not aware of any other ones. I was surprised by how many when I started researching it, how many are out there. So we're gonna stay home on Monday instead of Friday, because when you have a high school, Friday's a big day in a high school. That's football game day, that's winter sports. Then you're busing the kids in. We're gonna close the schools down, the elementary schools especially, that extra day, so they'll be closed 3 days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And we staggered the start time, so now we're going to we cut our transportation staff by 30%. Of course, that's all people in the community. That's a difficult conversation to have. But we're starting our first school at 7 a.m. in the morning. Those kids will go from 7 to 3. That's K-8. Think about that. That's an 8-hour school day for kindergartners and first graders and so on. Then our next school starts at 7:45, so the few drivers we have left can populate the one school, then run back and do the routes for the second school. Then that's the high school, and then the third school starts at 8:30, so their school day will be 8:30 to 4:30. That's a long time. And it squeezes your after-school activities when they can't even get going till, say, 5 o'clock. So that adds complications. Well, the choice was, do we want to do this and preserve art, music, PE, career and technical education, and extracurricular activities? And we have a myriad of extracurricular activities. We have the chess club, robotics club, dance club, fitness club, all sorts of things like drama club, and in addition to the typical sports, we branched out into a lot of those. And that immeasurably enriches what's going on in those schools and builds community. So the board made the hard decision to go to the 4-day week, and now we're planning on how that will impact instruction. So that's, because it's different. You can't use the stand and deliver method for 8 hours and expect kids any more than you'd expect adults not to be getting whiplash. Oh, sorry. So that's going to change instruction. Now, a couple things I'll mention on the classroom spending. We lost the override, but 2 years earlier we were successful in getting a bond passed. And we're a wealthy district in terms of property because we have the Palo Verde nuclear generating station there, and that has an assessed value all by itself of just under $800 million. So you can take a little tiny tax, a little tiny percent of 800 million generates a lot of revenue. But still the override didn't pass. It didn't pass. The average a homeowner with an average property would have had a tax increase of about $8.95 a year.
How many votes did you lose that one?
We lost it by about 300 votes, which was about a 56 to 44. It wasn't as close as it might have been. We were hurt by the bitter tone of this past election. You know, it really got kind of a nasty edge to it toward the end, and there were a lot of, I think that hurt us. We didn't make our case convincingly to the voters.
This is just, and we were talking about a little bit, but like this is insane, like hearing what you have to go through. I mean, it truly is, but the fact that you're achieving. So how, I mean, to what extent then is someone gonna say, well, they can still do it. So keep bleeding, keep bleeding, keep bleeding. It's like, to what point?
That's a very good point, because some of us have said, you know, we keep making do, and I guess that means we don't really need the money, except that you see opportunities lost for kids.
Totally, but how do we get people to hear that, to know that, like, because if they just look at your school scores and your graduation rate, they're doing phenomenal, you know? They
don't see that I have a high school with no nurse,
Yeah,
400 kids.
Right.
And I would say.
That was a frill, we had to cut the nurse.
Yeah.
Mark is truly extraordinary. What he has done is extraordinary. That
Right.
is not what is happening around the state. If you look across the board in terms of student performance, the only metric that you can look at statewide and say we've actually done better over the last 7 years is in 3rd grade reading. That's it. You can't really look at anything else on a statewide perspective and say we're doing so much better, so these cuts aren't having a significant impact. And, not coincidentally in my opinion, the third grade, the Move On When Reading Initiative is one of the only reforms that actually was funded. There was $40 million that went in specifically for interventions to help
Right.
kindergarten through third graders read by the end of third grade. So what Marcus had to do in terms of his budget is extraordinary. The achievement he's managed to squeeze out of that system is extraordinary, but it is not typical, it's not normal enough.
And one of the things, let me finish my thought and then I'll take questions on the bond election. So that funded, I capitalized shamelessly on the tragedy at Newton and said we need to improve safety in our schools. That was one of my selling points. We need to stop transporting kids in 15 to 20-year-old buses, which is what we had. Had no capital to buy any. And thirdly, I said we need to improve technology because we have 21st century learners out there. We don't know what kind of jobs they'll be having in 2050, 2060, but we know those jobs will involve technological tools. So we need to put those tools in their hands. Because we had a district with 70 to 80% free lunch, and a lot of those kids don't have that technology at home. So we need to bridge that digital divide. And I told the board, we got the money right now from this bond election, which we passed by 13 votes, but a win's a win. Which, by the way, were 18-year-old high school kids who had turned 18 before they graduated, which I got registered and sent to vote. So we got a one-to-one program for down through 5th grade this year, and we're expanding it to 2nd grade next year with a Chromebook in every kid's hands. The high school kids take them home. Now, that's been an incredible enhancement to classroom teaching, just incredible. It's transformed the way we're teaching. That money does not count as classroom spending. In fact, it's going to make us look worse on classroom spending, and yet a Chromebook in every student's hand all day long for learning, but doesn't count. Now, if I bought textbooks, that would have counted as classroom spending, but we're not buying textbooks anymore because they become outmoded. And if you have technology, then you can access things like that. And this is a book lover who's saying this, but I do a lot of reading on electronic devices myself now, but that doesn't count as classroom spending. So that's actually, that big initiative is going to hurt our percentage of dollars in the classroom. So it's odd how some of those things work, but yet, to me, that was just critical to do that. I told the governing board when I was saying this is how we want to spend some of this bond money. I said, we have the money right now, we have the need, so if not us, who? If not now, when? When will our poor kids get technology in their hands if we don't do it today? If we don't take advantage right now of this opportunity to change kids' lives with technology, how can we not do that? So they agreed to do it, and it's transforming our district. In fact, we're going in a couple weeks to a national conference in Philadelphia, grant paid, to present the digital conversion, as we're calling it, we were chosen to give a presentation to this International Society of Technology and Education and tell them how we've managed this. But the 4-day work week is going to be difficult. Yes, sir.
You had mentioned in the beginning that you had a lot of felt like mediocre to not great teachers. How did you get rid of that?
This was the first year out there we non-renewed. Out of this teaching staff of 80, we non-renewed 28. That's difficult to do, but you know that you can have a school that's got a poor label, but if your child's in a classroom with a great teacher, your child's going to have a great year.
Yeah.
And so we really had to observe, document, put people on plans. By say we, me, and me supporting the principals, and the board supporting that, because a lot of those 28 teachers lived in the community. But that was at the time, 2008-09, when the severe budget cuts were hitting all the other districts. So, as someone says, never waste a crisis. So we were able to replace those teachers with a lot of experienced teachers who were losing their jobs in other districts, and we're happy now to get a job at Saddle Mountain, even if it meant making a commute. And I worked in another district for many years, and I made a lot of connections, and there were people out there who were interested in coming to work with me, and so we were able to replace a lot. But that's ongoing. that is ongoing. Almost every year we don't mean to be harsh about it, but it's just, I have to weigh that there's kids in the classroom. In high school, for example, you've got a kid for 4 years. What if you have a bad math teacher and they teach math incorrectly for a year? Then that takes it 1 more year to undo that. Now you say, I felt kind of bad for that teacher. I know that they're supporting a family, so I'm going to give him a chance another year, even though every indication is he's not responding to coaching, he's not responding to suggestions to improve. So now the kids that he has have gone half their high school life with that bad teacher. Sorry, it's too long. You need to, so that's one thing we've really been strict on. And frankly, the big difference in our high school graduation rate going up like that is that. The state came out, the 3rd year they came out, they had sent a solutions team because we had that low graduation rate previously and it was affecting our average, so they were going to come in, people from the Department of Ed, and figure out what had been going wrong at the school. Well, they said the second day they came marching across from the high school to my office in the parking lot, just across from there, and I thought, oh boy, something must happen at the high school. They said, a group of your kids pulled us aside and said they really needed to talk to us in private. Whoa, what happened? What did they tell them? They said, Dr. J, that's what they call me, Dr. J and Mr. Garcia got rid of all the bad teachers. We have good teachers now. And this was unsolicited from the kids, and I just thought, yes, it's not quite true, but we still had a few that I thought could improve more, but the kids know. You can't fool kids. That's what our teacher evaluation system, 17% of the evaluation is based on a survey of students in that teacher's classroom. We use the tripod survey out of Harvard, and that's part of the teacher evaluation is what the kids think of the teacher. And teachers have totally bought into that, the teachers we have now.
Yeah, I have a daughter-in-law that's a school teacher in the Kyrene district, and she's got little kids, and she makes it clear to me, if she had to have a career again, it would not be in teaching. No. And she said that, and she is team teaching now, which is better for her little kids, but that, I don't know how you keep teachers.
It's been difficult.
The turnover must be among us.
This year we had a little more of a turnover because we'd recruited a lot of kids out of the East Coast, and they spent a couple of years, and some of them are successful because they network in, but others, if they don't, then they get homesick and they go home. And so we've had some
It's also 112
turnover.
here. So.
Pardon?
It's also really hot here.
And some like that, but some it's a big cultural adjustment. I came down here from North Dakota, from a small high school in North Dakota, and ended up working in inner city Glendale at a school of 1,000 7th and 8th graders. That was cultural shock for me.
Sorry to relay on the teacher thing, but is it you have to recruit out of state because we don't have?
We don't produce enough in state. We do get some people in state too, but we do recruit out of state as well.
I had a question about the 4-day school week. So the parents, the voters, who didn't approve the override, now have to watch the kids at home on Monday or get daycare and pay for it, right?
And I hope this might make them change their mind.
So do you think there will be brain cell activity around $8.90 whatever cents that they gave up, and then paying to have kids taken care of all day while they go to work?
Yeah, it's interesting you'd say that. At the meeting, we had a big public meeting where the board decided, attended by about 150 people. And one parent stood up and said, listen people, we could have spent $10 more a year. Now we're going to spend $20 to $30 more a day? Or what kind of a bargain was that? I'm sitting there trying not to go, yes, thank you. This is out of the mouth of a parent, someone who has been a pretty good supporter of ours. He had started the other way, but sometimes the way to do it is you find your loudest critic and you invite that person in to be on the school improvement team, you invite that person in to be on the site council, you bring that person in and say, let's open the books and look. Let's see where all the money is being wasted. You know, that's been my way of trying to win people.